in ancient times. Remember, this is ancient to 2,500 years ago. People lived according to the seasons. People ate according to the seasons. They didn't eat before they went to bed. They chewed their food. And he started to go into this whole story, which we all can understand now with our understanding of macrobiotics. And basically what he told them was because people followed the order of the universe and followed the order of nature, they lived to be 100 years of age, which to the Chinese was considered an important sign. 100 years was considered to be the natural allotted lifespan of a human being. So if you didn't live to that, you fell short somewhere. The Divine Agriculture, or the Book of Agriculture, and the Yellow Emperor's Classic became something like very revered, and down through the ages have been studied by many cultures, Japan, India, and subsequently people in the West, but not with the same kind of understanding as the original Chinese. From this point in time, there were many successions, many different emperors in China, and many different successions and many changes. But in the Zhou dynasty, it was in this era that the I Ching came out. This was the Book of Changes. And what this book had done, it had taken the 8 trigrams of Fu He, and it had evolved them into 64 hexagrams. Why 64? What does 64 ring a bell? Where does the number 64 ring a bell?
8 squared.
Yes. I won't argue with your math. Why this number? In other words, according to the Book of Changes, there are 64 changes, 64 stages in human growth, in nature, in society. All possibilities occur within these 64 stages. Where did they come up with the number 64? Why not 62, 81? Why 64? We've studied that there is 3.2 billion years of biological evolution that we have evolved on this planet. Also, we have 32 vertebrae, 32 teeth. This 3.2 billion years is being demonstrated by 64 stages. That from the beginning of biological life on this planet to present day, this is trying to illustrate that. That means that some people use this book to, what we would call, to tell fortunes, to understand the future, if they could understand it, if they could read it correctly. Of course, that was all up to interpretation. Like many people today are looking at the I Ching to figure out whether they should go into business or not. Or should I go out with her? Or, you know, will I win the lottery? I'm going to roll the I Ching. That way they're using it, which is not the way that it was meant to be used. So this, of course, is much more, not more complicated, but more in-depth version of this simple understanding. So from this simplicity, we went to a more complicated and more sophisticated understanding. But actually, if we really understand things well, we can understand it in its simplicity. It was later on that Lao Tzu and Confucius came onto the scene in China. They were contemporaries of each other, but at the time that Lao Tzu was old man, Confucius was still relatively younger, in early, 30s. They physically, supposedly met once. One of the problems is that the disciples of Lao Tzu and the disciples of Confucius argued and fought a lot because of their different philosophies. The Confucius disciples thought that the followers of Lao Tzu were wild and crazy guys, and they had no morals, no ethics. And the followers of Lao Tzu thought that the followers of Confucius were real square and real dry, that they were always trying to be ethical and moral, and so they really had very divergent philosophies. Then one day, as the story goes, Confucius went to visit Lao Tzu, and they started to talk, and Lao Tzu asked him, "Why do you try and tell people what to do? Why do you tell them you should act this way, you should say this, you should be this way? Why do you tell them that? And Confucius answered, because people need to develop virtue, people need to develop their ethical, moral understanding and relationships between family and emperor, etc. And Lao Tzu just looked at him and said, you have no faith. Afterwards, Confucius went back to his students and they said, well, what happened? And his answer was, I have seen the dragon. The dragon in Chinese mythology means the great spirit. Confucius then spent the rest of his life writing the commentaries on the I Ching. He sort of really changed his orientation in the latter part of his life and started to study this. Lao Tzu, as the story goes, tried to leave town. He tried to retire and leave town, and he was recalled by the emperor and instructed, please, you must write a book. You must tell us what your teaching is. And then he wrote the one and only book that he did write, which was called the Tao Te Ching. And this was his way of explaining the phenomena of nature and relationship between human being and nature. Those things were very revered in China and were studied very deeply by many scholars, philosophers, physicians, etc. India, developing Buddhism, Hinduism from the Vedanta culture, began to send monks into China. And as the monks brought Buddhism into China, they started to study the Chinese classics. Then they went to Japan to spread Buddhism, and as a result started to introduce Chinese philosophy, Chinese medicine to Japan. Japan did not have a medical book. Japan did not have an I Ching or did not have the Yellow Emperor's Classic. Basically, Japan was following a way of life using prayer, fasting, and diet as healing methods, also palm healing. They were more following a natural way of life rather than following some kind of written code. But they were much closer to China 3,000 years ago than they were today in terms of their lifestyle and philosophy. So they also used the terms yin and yang. Out of this whole process, a theory grew up. Yin Yang Go Kyo. This was the 5 transformations or 5 stages or 5 progressing appearances of nature. 5 progressing appearances of nature. And what these 5 stages were showing was literally how yin changes to yang, how yang changes to yin. How they evolve and progress in many different facets, in a human being, in nature, in the seasons, in the environment, etc. So it was a way of trying to look at change in a different stage. However, in order for us to do this, we really have to be very flexible and not literal and not try and fixate. Our problem comes from Western orientation is to always fixate and place something in something firmly. Where this is trying to talk about the energy of substance and how it is fluctuating and changing, and it may appear one way at one time and then appears another way at another time. This is one of the reasons why Western science could not understand Chinese acupuncture. Of all the things that acupuncture did, the only thing that Western science was trying to look at acupuncture was as a relief from pain. And they couldn't get a good explanation of it. So first, when it first came to the Western attention, it got a lot of publicity and a lot of attention, but then it waned considerably because they couldn't understand it. They couldn't understand the scientific principle behind it. And unfortunately, a lot of Chinese practitioners can't explain it well. They can't really explain how acupuncture works. They know it does work. They know that this needle and this point will do this. In other words, they're good technicians, but they're not good philosophers. So they can't explain the technique. And as a result of that, as well as Western science and yin and yang, It's now having another response, but it's not instantaneous. In other words, more serious look at occupying. In any case, let's take a look at these stages, and let's see how we can relate to them and understand them in nature. This becomes really fascinating when we start to talk about, and this is what we're going to cover. Today we're going to cover food, diet, and the physical effects. Next week we'll cover psychological, emotional, spiritual effects, and then relationships. If we have to pick a starting point, we'll pick tree energy. Tree energy was also called wood. It was also called gas. It's energy that's going up. It's energy that's going up and out. Its time of season is the spring. Its time of day is the morning. The next stage is fire energy. This is also can be called plasma. Its time of day is noon. Its season is summer. So this tree energy changes into fire energy, which you can depict with this kind of sign. This is energy that's scattered, dispersed, going out. Then this energy starts to change, and it becomes what we call soil energy, or earth energy. Its time of day is late afternoon. Its season is late summer. So its sign is like this. This is starting to fall, starting to come down. Then the next stage is metal, or you can also say gross matter. This is evening time, and this is fall. And you can look at it this way. Energy is coming tightly together. Then the next stage we can call water. This is for pooling. This is the time of day is night, and the season is winter. Then if we look at nature, we can see this way. The springtime, energy comes up, shoots up, and starts to go out. Then spring changes to summer, and things start to bloom. So tree energy is sprouting up. Fire energy is blooming. Fruit comes out. Then late summer, fruit falls. Starts to become more materialistic. When you burn something, plasma goes up, ashes fall down. The ash becomes the soil. This falls and starts to decompose. Then into the fall season where it becomes hard, dense matter. Then into the water season where it lies dormant. Now, during this winter season, seed is in the ground. Then if this seed becomes very young, in other words, dry, cold, the seed becomes very tight, very compact energy, very young. Then what happens when the spring comes and water and sunlight hits it? Right. It expands, and it'll expand rapidly and start to really grow fast. So the quality of seed will eventually produce the quality of fruit. The quality of fruit of anything is determined by the kind of seed it is. This includes human beings. Mother is seed. Mother is carrying seed. Every day she's feeding it Coca-Cola, potato chips, right, ice cream. Then what kind of seed is there? Huh? Yeah, very yin seed.
Very seeded.
Every day she's feeding it meat, cheese, chicken. Very young. Then what happens when it starts to bloom? No, it does. We're all here. Somewhere we bloom. But how do we bloom? Yeah, if this seed here is very young, then what does it want when it comes out? Attracted to yin food. If this is very yin, it's attracted to yang food. But the quality that's in here will determine the quality that it'll want once it comes out. Same thing with nature. Whether it's grain or fruits or vegetables, if the quality of seed is very strong, then when it comes here, it takes in strong yin, which is water and sunlight, and starts to grow. Then the yang quality, the yin quality, makes a very strong, dynamic vegetable, fruit, or grain, or whatever the food is. Then you eat that. Then when you eat that kind of fruit, that kind of vegetable, that kind of seed, then that energy in there makes you very strong. But suppose the seed is artificially induced or artificially fed. Then what happens?
You're not strengthened by it when you eat it.
You're weakened by it, and not only you're weakened by it, but potential problems arise as a result of that original quality being weak, which is a very prevalent problem right now in agriculture in the United States. The seeds are being bought up by the major seed companies. But they want to buy, they want to, if they could, buy up all the existing natural strains of seeds that are available. And then they want to hybridize them, which they've already done to a great extent. Very few natural seeds are left. Their thinking is that this will make more available and it'll be more economical and more proficient, et cetera, et cetera. They're not thinking that in doing that, they make it weaker and weaker and weaker. Then more blight comes. It becomes more susceptible to disease, more susceptible to insects, to the wind, to rain. It can't withstand that. They get weaker and weaker, so then they need more technology to prop it up. So we have this vicious circle. Every time there's a breakthrough, agricultural breakthrough with that kind of seed, it works for a year or so. Then the back is some insect or some blight or some disease hits it, and then it costs millions of dollars to keep supporting that kind of growth. But we're eating that. So when we're eating that, we get weaker and weaker and weaker. Then the connection between the seed and degenerative disease, nobody is seeing that link. For example, now what do they want to do with food? The biggest thing that's happening now.
Radiate.
They want to radiate it. So what happens if you radiate food?
Make it even more yin.
What will happen to people that eat radiated food? Huh? One magic thing happens, amongst other things. Right, you glow in the dark, right? Besides that, become sterile. You're sterilizing food, right? That means no bug, no virus, no nothing. So you take milk, you put it on the shelf. You know, right, 7 years later, you go back, it's still there. Right? No bugs want it. They're smarter. Hey, why would we want to eat something that's dead? Now, in Western science, that's not considered dead. By their measurements and by their standards, that's perfectly all right. We've done a wonderful thing. We've increased the shelf life of something. And now we don't have to worry about all these bugs and virus and bacteria. So to them, this is a tremendous breakthrough. But I really do feel psychologically, most people react to that. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't want to irradiate food that aren't into natural foods at all. Just the idea. They don't, psychologically, it doesn't sound right, even though they may not know the reason why. So they're having a big problem now pushing this on the public. The public doesn't know that already about 20% of the fruits and vegetables in this country are already irradiated. The big problem is that you don't know that. So there's two diverging groups. One group doesn't want it to happen at all. Another group wants it to be labeled. right? Anyway, this is the major battle going on now in the food industry. So this process is showing basically the 12 months or the 4-season cycle in nature. Technically, this is considered the center. This is considered the center, soil or earth energy. Then, what happens when we start to take a look at different qualities within the human being and different types of foods? When we eat certain foods, they're representing different types of energies. If you eat that food, that energy becomes you. That becomes your nature. This link right here can explain a lot about the reason why people are the way they are. Because of what they're eating, the type of energy that food conveys, then gives them a certain personality and a certain type of expression. And that's really all we are. We're a transformation of what we take in. We've taken in more than food also. We've taken in other things, vibration, etc. But very practically speaking, we can take a look at this, and so everybody is represented more or less by one of these types of natures, which we can get a little bit into a little later. Then, let's take a look at which organs are affected by these energies. In other words, which organs are activated by these energies. With tree, this is liver and gallbladder. This type of energy is activating liver gallbladder function. And taste-wise is represented by sour taste. Color, represented by gray. We'll come back to this in a minute. Fire is showing heart, small intestine, bitter taste, and the color red. Soil is showing spleen, pancreas, and stomach, sweet taste, and the color yellow. Metal is showing lung and large intestine, spicy taste, and the color pale or white. Water is showing kidney and bladder, the color black, and salty taste. Then, when we have liver problems, one way liver problems show up is that the person looks gray. Gray in the eyes, gray pallor. This is showing a malfunction of the liver. Heart problems. Person becomes red. Red face, red nose, etc. Capillaries expand. Spleen, pancreas problems. Person becomes yellow, like yellow jaundice. Metal problems. Lung, large intestine, person becomes pale. This is showing either anemic condition or stuck, poor circulation. And kidney problems, black shows up. How would we see these, for example? Like, where would the black show up? Under the eyes is one place. Circles, dark black circles under the eyes. Yellow color.
Skin.
On the skin, this can show up anywhere. In the white of the eye, the skin, hands, feet, many places this can show up. Pale color also. Facial complexion, fingernails, lips. Then, those colors are indicative of a malfunction. The taste that's associated with this is showing a taste that activates the energy of this organ. It activates the energy of this organ. Now, with this energy cycle, it's moving in 3 directions. One is this way. Another one is inside, it's moving this way. Tree energy is suppressing soil energy. Soil energy is suppressing water energy. Water energy is suppressing fire energy. Fire energy is suppressing metal energy. This is considered negative cycle, but don't necessarily think of the word negative as our definition negative. It can be. It can be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Then, going this way, also, it can go opposite direction, which would be real cute. In other words, this would cause a lot of problems. Energy is going this way. If this reverses and goes this way, then there's a big problem inside the system. This is the theory, the basic theory that acupuncturists are using when they treat organs. If this energy is real active here, if liver and gallbladder energy is real heightened, that means somewhere else, some other system or organ has to be depressed. If there's an excess somewhere, there has to be a deficiency somewhere else. So what they would do is they would decrease the energy here and increase the is the thinking, and is distinguished by So this relationship is complementary antagonistic by position and also by what they're handling and dealing. Many, like spleen, pancreas, stomach, very close. Liver, gallbladder, very close. Kidney, bladder are very close in structure, not in structure, but in position. Also in function. There's a very distinct correlation between kidney, bladder function. But lung and large intestine, why that one? Far apart. What's the relationship there?
The lung takes in and the large intestine passes out.
Okay. Large intestine is handling what kind of food? Solids. And eventually giving out waste. Lung is handling gas. This is complementary antagonistic. Actually, this is lung, large intestine is one system. Respiratory and digestive system is like top and bottom. Right? But they're handling a different form of food or a different form of energy. So this relationship is there. What this means is that any problem with the large intestine, some problem is with the lungs. Any problem with the gallbladder, some problem with the liver. Any problem with the heart, some problem with the small intestine. And you can even take one step further. Very, very much the case follows liver problem, then there's a possibility of heart and small intestine problem, or kidney problem, going like this way. Also, it can be antagonistic. That depends on how a person is eating. For example, suppose liver, gallbladder person likes spicy food. Right? Let's take very common things. This person here likes spicy foods. Then what happens? They eat it all the time.
The metal suppresses the wood.
So liver, gallbladder problem arises from overeating spicy food. But if this, eating spicy food here, this does not necessarily become sick quickly because it's able to handle it. If it eats sweet foods, it's able to handle it. But if this takes sour foods, then lung, large intestine starts to get sick if they take too much of. So the opposite taste from water would be bitter food, sweets. Bitter foods and sweet foods makes the kidney bladder weak. Heart. Salty foods, spicy foods makes the heart and small intestine weak. The opposite foods, which are always two, from here it's sweets and spice. From here it's salt and spice. From here it's salt and sour. From here it's sour and bitter. Those opposite tastes, then you think about, what taste do you like? How many, regardless of what quality, how many people here like bitter food? Now keep it down. What's an example of bitter food? Maybe you don't know.
Sharp radish.
Dandelion is bitter.
Watercress.
Bitter.
Kale.
No, not bitter. Not so much. What else? Burdock is sweet.
Shiitake.
Mescalero, chicory.
Chicory is bitter. What else? Some very common thing people eat a lot of. No, daikon is spicy. Coffee. Right? Coffee is bitter taste. Right? Bitter taste. Therefore, people drink a lot of coffee. The excess of that affects the liver. But what does coffee really affect? Kidneys. Right? Kidney bladder. I mean, you take coffee, you got to go to the bathroom. Right? And your adrenal glands, which is directly acted on by the caffeine. So coffee drinkers inevitably get weak kidney, bladder, and adrenal glands become exhausted. Also, it affects intestines and lungs. Then, how many people here like sweet taste? Amongst sweet taste, right, two distinct types. Complex polysaccharides, like grains, vegetables, beans, and refined, or simple, like fruits, honey, maple syrup, etc. If you take complex carbohydrates, not so much a problem, unless you eat, just overeat. But if you take refined sweets, then what's affected? People that take plenty of sugar. First off, pancreas becomes a problem. Insulin, anti-insulin, that becomes a problem. And opposite, liver problems, kidney problems, and too much sugar. How many people like spicy taste? Amongst macrobiotic foods, which are represented by spicy taste? Scallion, ginger, daikon. Then those things we use in the diet appropriately. Okay? But if it's other types of spices, like curries, oregano, those kinds of aromatic stimulants, then heart becomes weak. Liver becomes weak. This is inflaming it, expanding it. How many people like salty taste? A lot of people like salty taste. Then even if you take good quality salty taste, kidney becomes tight, or arteries become tight, intestines become tight. So many problems arise there. How many people like sour taste? Pickles, sauerkraut. Then if poor quality sauerkraut and whatnot, then it makes this a problem. But too much sour food then makes this a problem. If this energy becomes high, then this energy becomes suppressed. So you can start to see, even within the diet you're eating now, even within a good diet, if you start to like a particular taste and eat that taste all the time, you have potential trouble. We should not eat by taste alone. Taste alone creates a big problem. Then you have to really figure that out. Like sometimes people start to crave things. Now, they didn't necessarily want salty food, but then they start to crave salty food. There's a reason for that. We have to take a look at why all of a sudden somebody wants to have salty taste or sour taste or spicy taste. Have anybody experienced that after macrobiotics? A certain taste that before they didn't necessarily want, they started to like? What did you think was the cause? Hmm?
I guess too much of the opposite. Right?
How many people liked or wanted, after macrobiotics, a more salty taste? Anybody really crave spicy taste after macrobiotics? It's all right, you could be the only one, don't worry. It may mean something good. This principle is also there. Suppose, for example, kidneys are weak. Right? Kidneys are weak, a little sluggish. Then you may start to crave a taste that's actually what's necessary to make that energy come up. So you may I want salt. Don't always think in the negative why you want something. It could be a very positive, intuitive groping. You want salt to activate this energy. Maybe it's low. Suppose you're tired all the time. You feel tired and sluggish. Salt can cause that, or lack of salt can cause that. And many times when people make a dietary change to vegetarian or macrobiotics, they go anti-salt. That's a big mistake. The question is not anti-salt, it's a question of the appropriate amount of salt. So wanting or desiring a certain taste may be just what you need. Same thing with spicy taste. Sometimes if intestines are clogged or sluggish, then we use daikon, we use ginger to accelerate circulation. So craving that taste might be exactly what you need. Then you should include that in the diet. Same thing with all these things, like bitter. What would bitter taste be good for? What kind of condition? A weak, expanded condition. And bitter taste makes contracted. Bitter taste, of course, is more extreme. We have, what's the middle taste? What's the most yang taste? Anybody else? Shall we go for, how many people think salt's the most yang taste? Come on now. How many people think bitter's the most yang taste? How many people think spice is the most yang taste? Bitter. What happens when you take bitter food? Right? Pucker up, become drawn. Right? Not necessarily salt does that, only if you take a lot of salt. Most yin taste is what? Spice. Then in between here is salt. In between here is sour. Then this barometer from yang to yin. This means that this becomes the central taste for everybody. That means sugar is the main volume of food we eat. We're the biggest sugar freaks of all, right? At least 50 to 60% of our diet we are recommending should be sugar. However, the form should be polysaccharide. If it's refined, we're in big trouble. Polysaccharide. So that taste is central taste. Then we use salt in cooking. We use sour in cooking, like sauerkraut, pickles. That's a smaller proportion. And even more smaller in proportion is spice and bitter. But if you make bitter taste the predominant taste all the time, then definitely become imbalanced. So if we use this barometer, you can really enjoy the whole spectrum. But it's a question of how often and the quantity that you use that will determine, what the effect is. Like, it's very interesting when people go out to dinner. They go out to dinner, then they pick what they want, right? Then they go for some taste or some kind of dish that's certain taste is there. What they ought to think is, do I need this? Do I need this in the daily diet? Then they may not have such big desire to go out and get that. This is one of the reasons why we're encouraging people all the time to use the spectrum. Don't narrow the diet. Use these things, but learn how to use them appropriately. Then this movement becomes more balanced and more even.